Well, hi there. This is Laura Workala. I'm with Sew Ingenious on YouTube. I also have a school in the Boston, Massachusetts area called Laura's Sewing School. So I have this quilt. Most of these fabrics are designed by Anna Marie Horner. Great colors and everything like that. And I decided, it was a kit I got from Twin Cities Quilting in Minnesota. And they didn't include a border, and I thought I wanted to finish it off with a border, so I added a border, and then I put flannel on the back to make it cozy because I'm sending it to a relative in Minnesota. So it'll be going back to Minnesota all finished, put in wool batting. But here's the thing, this is not so much about this quilt as binding. You know, when you have binding, you get it all ready, and this is like the 2.5 inch wide. I folded it in half, so it's like a French binding, double binding on the bias. So if you ever want to see how I do bias binding, I have videos on that on YouTube. Okay, so check that out. Sew Ingenious on YouTube. So here's the thing, is that this binding, they originally wanted me to do the green fabric for the binding for the smaller quilt, and I decided to use it as an inner border. So I bought this because I thought it would go well with the pink back and that. But the thing is, what happens when you have a fairly big quilt, this is like 70 something by 85, and so it's big enough, you have a lot of binding. Okay, so I saw this picture on Facebook, and people were seemed like a joke, but it was actually a great idea. Is this woman does use crochet cotton, and those are kind of those little balls with a hole in it, and she put it on a toilet paper dispenser and used it while she was sitting and crocheting. And I thought, what a great idea. Maybe I could do that to dispense my binding. Okay, so it finally came in, and I finally had a quilt to try this on. And so what I did is that I cut a piece of tubing, because toilet paper rolls are 4.5 inches wide or so, and this is 5.25. So I cut it 5 inches so I could have enough space to kind of push this spring-loaded holder into there. What I found though is if I just use this with this could roll, and I was worried about it like just rolling and continuing to roll. So this thing came with this kind of, you want to get a little closer, Nita? I have a camera person today. It's such a deal. Usually I'm just clamping the phone to the light and hoping for the best. This is that kind of foamy sheet that can protect things when you buy something. So I thought, wait a minute, what if I wrapped it around here, and then it could go in here, and then it wouldn't unroll too fast, but it would still unroll, because you can see there's some space, but also it's a little more grippy. So I took and I rolled a couple of the sheets on there and taped it with Scotch tape, put a little courtesy tab on it so I can peel it off if I need to. I don't think I need to. And then what I do is I put it in here, and I bring it down here, and I'll put it onto this dispenser. All right, and I basically rolled the binding, whoops, there we go, back and forth on that roll, so it stays nice, you know, no creases or that. So I tend to sew my binding on as I go. I don't pin it ahead of time. Now when I do the fold at the corner, I'll pin it and then just continue. Okay, so I'm going to put this dispenser here, and I like to start on the bottom edge so any joint I might have isn't so noticeable. You never start at a corner. Most people know that, but I'm going to say it anyway because that's what I do. I'm going to do like a 2.4 stitch length. Now here's the thing, I always like to check. Now watch this, look at this, see this? I pull, and it pulls easily, but it doesn't keep pulling if I'm not pulling on it. It's like we use tension on our machine here and in the bobbin so the thread unwinds evenly. Well, I'm creating tension with that foamy stuff in there. I mean, you could find whatever would create that kind of thing, that kind of tension on that. So the one thing I like to do before I sew a binding is I like to check to make sure that whatever seam allowance I do is going to allow me to wrap it and stitch in the ditch. Okay, so the way I do that is I'm going to stick a pin in here. I'm thinking about maybe doing 5/16, which is like center needle position side of the foot. Most presser feet, unless you've got a really big machine that does like 9mm wide stitches, a lot of sewing machines, the presser foot is 5/8 of an inch wide. And using the side of the foot as your guide can be very helpful. boy, I think these things get big and it's harder and harder to manage. Luckily, I've got a great table. So what I can do is I can put those pins in to mimic where the stitching line is, roll it like this, and then roll it to the back and make sure it's going to go beyond where the pins are. And there's plenty of room, which is really good. And I think that looks good, huh? You only see a little bit of this on the front, you know, so it doesn't have to be the perfect color match. I just wanted to get what they had at the fabric store in my building. So, all right, so what I'm going to do is that when I first sew this, I've pre-pressed this angle 3/8 of an inch over so that I can, when I come all the way around the quilt, I can tuck it in here and sew it. So I'm going to start near the corner, and I'm actually going to sew with the side of the foot here, and I've got a darker thread, so I think it'll be good. And I'm going to go like this and then back stitch, and then I'm going to sew just one layer for a little ways, because I'm going to tuck in the end when I come back around. A little back stitch, cut the thread. Now I've sewn that. Now let me check it, because this looks kind of wider than what I pinned. I want to check that and make sure. Oh, that's going to be too tight, I think. You see, it's barely hitting this stitching line. So I'm going to have to guide it a little differently. Another option I could have, usually when I sew on binding, I'm just using a regular presser foot. I'm not worrying about trying to use a walking foot, because sometimes by using this bias and laying it down and sewing it, it's almost like it's helping ease the edge in a little bit, because sometimes the edges of your quilt are wavy. And if they look really wavy to me, I'll shrink them. And that's another video I did a little while back on the Citrus Starburst quilt that I made. And you can look that up because I did it right before I put some binding on. So this is actually too wide, okay? And you've got to get the right width. I mean, it's actually a little crooked here too. So one thing I may want to do, because I'm not liking the way this is feeding, is that I'm going to go ahead and use my walking foot mechanism on this, you know. Now here I have to like basically break every stitch, but I'm gonna do it from this side because it's easy to see. And I bend this so I don't actually get the tip of the seam ripper in the fabric and cut the fabric. And which I just cut a little thread there. See, I'm just showing you what you're not supposed to do. So, all right. So
she meant to do that.
Yes, exactly. See, I got to show you, you know, as a teacher, you know, the good and the bad. This is a seam ripper, by the way, by my friend Cynthia Ellis. She does these gorgeous hand-turned wooden seam rippers out of beautiful woods. She can't get this wood hardly at all. She really can't get it anymore. The factory burned down, and it was the only place in the U.S. that made these colored woods. And so she has a little bit of stock left, and she might include it partly in a seam ripper, and she'll do spalted wood and other various exotic woods. So she does beautiful work. She's in New Hampshire. She has a website called Wood by Sea, so Wood by Cynthia. She used to be out in California, and now she's in New England, in Dover, New Hampshire. So we met, oh God, 12 years ago, and I've been a dedicated fan ever since. All my friends get them as gifts. Did I give you one? I probably did.
And then I bought several more from her.
Right, yeah, because how can we not? So this machine actually has an option to engage a dual feed. So I'm going to put this foot on, and then I'm probably going to move the needle over so I can put the feed dogs in like that, and then I'm just going to move the needle way over. You can see it moving little by little, so I can maybe guide it here or something. I'll have to guide it in a way that works, but I think I'm going to have to do that. There's a 1/4 inch foot but that has a guide, but I'm not sure that I really want to use that. Okay, take 2. Okay, now one way to check is, let's see, sewing gauge. Okay. All right, so I want to see, where is this at? Where is a 1/4 inch? 1/4 inch is like right there. Okay, so I think what I'll do is I'll try and eye it there. Not the best, but what can you do? I just feel like it's not feeding the way I want it to with the regular foot, and I usually use the regular foot, okay? So, something like that. Okay, so I had a student earlier today who was just quilting a regular, you know, kind of small baby quilt with made of squares, like charm squares, and her machine had a pressure setting for the presser foot from like maybe 1 all the way up to 6, and she had it at 2, and she was having a hard time with it feeding. Now this is much better, I can already see. So now if I wrap this around, that's going to go past that much better. Okay, so now I've done this just 1 layer, because when I come around and I tuck it in, I don't want this to pull away from the edge. So this is kind of, you know, a dual purpose. This video is just a little bit about binding, but I don't want to do too much about that. But it was to show you my brilliant idea. I think I'm going to do this just as a guide, you know, because
And that's your magnet.
that's my magnetic guide. Yeah, these are great. These are magnetic seam guides, and I just feel like I want to. I'm afraid if I go like this, there's not enough metal to really hold it, so that's why I'm tipping it like this. But I think that that's a good place, and I'm going to make sure the needle stops down. So what I do when I have a quilt like this, I get it so it doesn't like get stuck around the corner of the table, and that this is loose enough that it's going to feed well. So right now, if you look here, I've got my stand right here. I don't have to worry about my roll of binding falling on the floor or coming undone or putting a twist in the binding, which can happen when I'm pulling it, you know. So I'm just really feeling like this is a great way to do binding. And you can always make binding and keep it on rolls and then just put it on the dispenser when you need it. So I'm going to go like this and just lay this flat, and then I'll just guide it. So the biggest thing for me is I think I'll just do one side and one corner, and we'll be done with this video, okay? But I wanted to show how I can use this dispenser idea for my binding, okay? So I'm almost to the point I need to pull on it. Sometimes if my edge is too fluffy and difficult to work with, I will actually serge the edges together. And sometimes you can maybe get the differential feed to ease it. Sometimes if I find that the edge is too wavy, I'll do another technique. But like I said, look for the Citrus Starburst quilt in the binding tutorial, and you'll see how I do that, okay? I'm not gonna repeat that here. So I just, you know, and my arm's resting on the quilt, and it's helping move it forward, because these things get heavy and they get caught. I mean, I have this big quilting cabinet, and it still gets caught, like the extension here, there's like this L shape here, and it can get caught. So it's really good if you are setting up your machine at, say, the dining room table or something like that. Set the machine up at the far right hand corner so you have all this, and then maybe if you need some support over on this side, maybe use a card table or some other table that's just to your left to support the quilt as it's being fed, you know? Because, okay, watch. Is that like so cool? Did you hear the shush?
I can hear it.
It's got a shush. How fun is that? So you see, I needed to feed it. So I just went boop, and it doesn't keep feeding unless I need it. I'm just so thrilled with this idea. So anyway, pass it on. You know, I mean, it's something anyone can do. You can go to the store and order one of these dispensers, buy a dispenser, or maybe order it. This came from Bed Bath & Beyond. And I would have done curbside, but they didn't have one that I wanted, and so they just shipped it to me. So I didn't even have to go anywhere. It took a little longer because, you know, everything takes a little longer during COVID. And it finally came, but I didn't need it until it had already come, because this quilt, I've been working on it for a couple weeks, and it just got quilted, and my quilter Dorian, who is fantastic, Dorian Kasayan, she's here in town in Arlington, Mass, and she brought it over, which was really nice. She was out and about, so she said, I'll just bring it to you. I had a class this morning to teach. So you see, I'm kind of using my arm. This arm is traveling along here, keeping it, but I'm letting the weight of my arm help move the quilt along, because these things get stuck. Oh, pulling the, and look, if there's a little slack, it doesn't hit the floor, you know? And that's especially important right now, as I have a puppy, not here today, but he wants to grab anything he can. But this is it for me forever, I think. for dispensing with binding, because it's just so easy. I don't have to worry about it anymore. So yeah, feel free to do that. My machine gets a little noisy, but you can. And so I just match the edges. I hold it and my hands follow it. See, and then when I get close, I stop. I reset this. Now, of course, you know, when you're doing a miter in your corner, you want to take, I put a pin here right in the quilt for where I want to stop and back stitch. Okay, whatever the seam allowance you're sewing on this is how far you should stop from the corner. So this is kind of a generous 1/4 inch. So that's what I'm going to stop from the corner and back stitch, is a generous 1/4 inch. So I like to put that pin in. I don't pin the binding down because who knows if it's going to be in the right place. Oh, dang it. I have a seam at the corner. I hate it when I have a seam at the corner. Oh well, I'll just deal with it. I mean, I could redo it, but I don't feel like it.
It just bulks it up a little bit.
Yeah, it definitely does. You have to pin it much better when you're going to stitch in the ditch because of that. Dang it. Well, okay. Actually, because I've got this, I'll pull it away because I want to leave the pin in, because that pin is my indicator. Okay, and I can go needle up, needle down, needle up. I'm going to hand turn it. I want to back it off just a little bit. Now I'll go in reverse, because you have to back stitch because you're going to be monkeying with that corner. Okay, so now if you look, it's not all the way there. It's because we want to take and fold this up in a miter. Now I happen to have a miter right here in my border, so that can actually show you that your miter in your binding is going to kind of match that miter there. Now I'm going to pin it over here to hold that miter in place. So it's gonna look weird. We're gonna be, instead of going around the corner like that right away, we're gonna fold it away from the corner so we create a miter underneath. Then we're gonna fold this down like this, okay? And then I'm gonna put the pin in like this so that it's not in the way of the guide. This fold is even with this edge. These cut edges are even with that. Now the thing is, you do not sew this way, okay? Because you have to flip that up and around the corner when you want to sew the other side. So I'm going to get this set right here, put this back where I wanted it, and let's see, that shouldn't be in the way of the, wow, that feels really, well, it's kind of thick. Too bad there's no shimming button on this, but I think it'll be fine because it's got the, why does that, it is down, okay. Needle down. I can pull that out, and then I'm just going to continue and do that. And then of course at the very end, I'm going to take the ironing board, press this outward like this so it folds right at the stitching line. Then I'm going to wrap it around, and what happens is that if you do this with the right amount, you can pin in the ditch. And if this is really a good amount, maybe about 1/8 of an inch beyond this stitching line right here, and you pin in the ditch because you're going to stitch in the ditch, and if the pin hits this binding in the back, your stitching is going to hit it. Okay, so that's really the biggest thing. I just wanted to show you this dispenser because I was so darn excited about this idea and that it actually works, you know. So I hope you like it. I hope it helps you out, you know, and if you want to see this quilt finished, it's on my Facebook page, and it's going to be shipped off as soon as I finish it to a friend. Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Bye.